Welcome. This is May 31st, 2025. My guest is Barbara Lamb, on for the third time. She's a world-renowned ET regression therapist who's worked with over 3,000 people. She's also a crop circle researcher, speaker, and author, and I got her information linked below in the video. Today, I asked Barbara if she could give me her expert feedback on my ET hypothesis and sources. It's a video blog I have linked below. So welcome back, Barbara. Great to see you again.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So should I just sort of go through my thesis bit by bit and you can give me feedback as you go?
I think that's good. Yes.
I'll start off, say with my big picture of the ETs. I think they bring life across the whole galaxy, probably other galaxies too, but just concerning this scale, I think the mantid ETs are the highest intelligence we're aware of, and they probably bring life to planets all over the galaxy, and the Greys work with the mantids, I'm sure, and they work with others as well. So I think that's the big picture. Mantids bring life across the galaxy. And I think the way they relate to Earth here, I think there's some type of federation of planets where the ETs have an agreement amongst themselves and their relationship with Earth, and there's some type of a federation, like an organizational kind of a structure amongst the ETs. Do you want to start with feedback on that?
Yes. Well, I'll start with the mantis beings because I run into the mantis beings in the sense that here in many of the regressions I do to people's extraterrestrial encounters. And the mantis beings aren't always there in these experiences, but quite often they are. So they seem to be in charge of whatever is going on. In other words, if a person is lying on a medical type table on the spaceship and other beings are surrounding the table and doing various procedures, very often when I'm having the person describe whatever he or she sees, and I want to get good descriptions of the beings there, and so they'll describe the ones around the table first, which might be quite a variety of beings, from little grays to taller gray types and even human types and reptilian types sometimes. And then they'll often say, oh yeah, and then there's another one a little bit further away from the table, but watching what's going on the table. And they'll describe that as a mantis being. So they think, the people who experience this, think that mantis is sort of overseeing what the other beings are doing, as if that mantis being is in charge. So that's a very typical situation that has come up in my regression work. But people have also described having experiences with mantis beings in other ways. One woman, for instance, whom I did, probably 10 or 12 regressions with, she was taken from her home, not by little grays, as many people are, but taken consistently by a tall white mantis being with a tall, long white robe. And he would take her to some really unusual experiences too. One time he took her out, way out in space, it seemed to her. They just kept going and going without even being in a craft. And they could see that they were approaching what looked to her like a big floating city of lights. And it had glass domes and spires and unusual shapes, all made of glass and sort of glowing. So the mantis being took her into that city and into one particular building, and then introduced her to one of the extraterrestrial beings there, who was a different type, not a mantis type, but a tall type. And and then they had interactions for quite a while. And then the mantis being took her out of there and back home again. So that was an unusual mantis situation. And that same woman was visited by that mantis being, um, many, many times. And on one weekend, she was babysitting for her granddaughter, 4-year-old granddaughter. And it was her turn, I guess, to go with the mantis being. So he came and took her and from the other room, the little granddaughter. So the three of them went up, and it seemed to her that they just kept going up really high in space and not into a spacecraft, as usually happens, but onto what looked like a big white platform, probably hundreds of feet in diameter, and onto the middle of that platform. So in other words, just this big platform in space. That's what it certainly seemed like to her. And then the mantis being tall and thin and with the long white robe, he took her hand and took the hand of the little girl. So they were kind of in a circle, and they circled around playing a little game, I think very similar to our game of Ring Around the Rosie. And the little girl was laughing and having fun. And my client, her grandmother, was having fun with it and thinking, well, she had come to like that mantis being quite well. But she now thought, oh, he's not only a nice being, but he's really fun. And she would not have expected that he was playing with them. So that was a lovely experience. So there are many different reports about the mantis beings, but everyone who encounters them does make comments like they seem very knowing, or they seem very wise, or they seem to be in charge here. So I have built up a very positive feeling about the mantis beings over the years, just from many, many people's experiences. Now, one lady came for regressions, and she had encountered a mantis being and other types of extraterrestrial beings all at one point, all outside her back door, outside the kitchen door. And she could see that there was somebody out there, and she opened the door, and one of the little grays was right there closest to the door. So she wasn't afraid of him because he was small, even though he looked different. So there she was with about 4 or 5 different species of extraterrestrials. And she looked up and up and up to see a mantis being. And they said that she will be having experiences in her life with that big mantis being. And she didn't object to the smaller ones who were more like her size at age 4 or so. But she said, but that one, that's a big bug. But over the years, as she grew up and in her adult life too, she had many experiences with that mantis. And she did sometimes still refer to him as the big bug, but she came to realize that he's much more than that, that he's this very wise and safe being. So that whenever she was taken by that being, she wasn't frightened. She had learned over the many years since her childhood to trust that mantis being, that whatever he was going to take her for was going to be really all right, even though very often it involved other types of beings once she would get to the spaceship.
Yeah, I guess because he was in charge. Did you mention the first mantis? You said it had a white robe. Did you say the mantis was white as well?
Some of them are reported in my regressions, reported as white, very, very white. And because they have the really big dark eyes. I know you have a wonderful picture of one of them. Um, and sometimes they're reported um, as purple, even. One woman I know uh, became rejoined in one of the regressions with a purple, tall purple mantis being, and she just loved that being. She was delighted to see him again. So they are reported as black sometimes, completely black skinned or white or purple. Um,
I think green and brown is quite common too, right?
yeah, and green. I've heard. I'm not sure I've heard of brown, but that there may be some of that sort. So there are variations on the theme, um, but still they seem to be really wonderful beings.
Okay, great. So the next part of my Brian Ruhe's ET hypothesis and sources is that likely President Eisenhower met with aliens in February of 1954. That it might have been like at Holloman Air Force Base or something, and that the ETs confronted the humans. And I think probably Eisenhower wasn't the leader. I think, in my view, like the Rothschilds were running the world then, and now like the Rothschild banking family. So I would assume a Rothschild agent were there. But the ETs are saying, no, we want you to get rid of your nuclear weapons. We can teach you to be more spiritual. You have to take better care of the environment. But the human leaders rejected it. They didn't want to get rid of the nuclear weapons because the Russians have them. I guess that was an issue. So then the ET said, well, then you're going to have to deal with the Greys. You can
Ah,
no deal with us. So I think there's human type aliens.
oh yes, there are some that and many maybe some of them live amongst us because they're human enough looking. And they're usually the ones that I have heard about from people who experience them, that they're very attractive from our, at least from our Western uh, point of view. Many of them are described as looking like Nordic beings,
Yeah, very
Scandinavian
good looking.
types. Yeah, with blonde hair or light brown hair, blue eyes even, and looking very human. There might be a little bit of difference here and there, such as longer earlobes, that some of them described by Billy Meyer, for instance, had definitely had longer earlobes.
Interesting. In Buddhism, that's a sign of wisdom to have long earlobes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Ah, and then their eyes might be looking very human, but they're usually a little bit larger than our eyes are in proportion to our faces. But anyway, they're very attractive men and women from the Pleiades and allegedly from other planets as well. The Pleiades
Okay.
is the only place in existence that has those very human looking beings.
Okay. What about the Eisenhower meeting? You think that's true that President Eisenhower may have actually met with ETs?
I think so, because I've heard about that from so many different angles, from different people. I mean, the details might be different. For instance, in one report that came out quite a while back, I mean, years ago now, um, that he met with little beings who were more like the little gray beings,
Oh, oh.
and yet you're mentioning beings that seemed more human-like.
He might have had more than one meeting. I don't know.
Yeah, he might have. So, so I don't know, but I think I've heard of that from so many sources of people who would have the right to know that I think that that is true.
Okay. I think what's significant about that is since the humans rejected what the ETs wanted, then they say, well, you're going to have to deal with the grays. And I guess that's when they switched to their plan B, which is like the hybrid program, which they already had underway. So things, history could have gone a different direction in 1954. But it seems what we have now is the hybrid program. And probably the ETs are based on, say, city size ships like this in space. These could be like 200-mile across city size ships, or underground bases under the sea or under the land. So they could be
Right.
operating there, and that this widespread hybridization program is underway. So you want to comment on that?
Well, I just think that there's so much going on. I do think that we have underground base areas where the reptilians live. One of them is not that terribly far from where I am in Southern California.
Was that Catalina Island, that one?
No, I'm thinking of the Mojave Desert,
Oh, okay.
east of Los Angeles, and sort of between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. So
Oh,
big old dry, it's not a sand desert, but just very dry land with little, just scrubby little growth on it. And I was driving through there once with a friend who was an experiencer and very interested in these things. And we had to stop to get some lunch or get some gas or something. And we asked the young woman in that facility, and this was looking right out at the Mojave Desert with some hills in the background. And as we were paying, we asked this young woman, have you ever seen anything unusual out here? And the young lady said, "You mean out there in that desert?" "Yes, that's what we mean." And she said, "Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, I was just looking out there one day when I didn't have any customers here, and I saw somebody walking, and it was somebody walking upright, and she thought it was probably a regular human man, but she wondered why that human man would be walking out there totally by himself in that desert area. It's very dry and very hot. And she went to her window and looked more carefully and determined that, that's not really a man, that's something else. And the coloring of that man was very mottled. So it was sort of greens and browns, variation of colors all over that person, almost like camouflage cloth, except she could see that it wasn't cloth, it was the skin of that person. And anyway, the way that she described him, it certainly sounded like a reptilian, because she was saying, I don't think there is such a thing, but it's like a big upright walking lizard of some sort.
wow.
Yeah, so I think she really had seen a reptilian being there.
Okay, probably from a base. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there
So,
are other reports of a big reptilian base down in the ground in that area.
okay, very good. Yeah. So I think part of my hypothesis too is they've been bringing life to Earth over billions of years, like the mantids and the grays. Like, for instance, the Cambrian explosion was about 530 million years ago. These larger animals and plants just appeared in a short period of time. So I think they're probably brought here by the mantids. Like, science can't explain really how that happened so fast. It seems kind of mystifying. So I think this has been
Mm.
going on for a long time. So I think what they're doing now is just an upgrade. They decide, well, humanity's got to be upgraded to a better form. Like Homo sapiens sapiens was good for a while, but now we're in big cities and there's lots of problems with Homo sapiens sapiens. Got wars like we discussed in the previous, you talked about the nature of human in the previous video. So I think they're back since the 1800s to gradually do this kind of upgrade, and they feel that no, they can't have overt full UFO disclosure. It has to be done gradually. And I think disclosures in charge by the ETs, not human governments. The ETs decide on the process of disclosure, and that humans cannot handle the truth right now. So it has to be done gradually. So you can comment on that part of my thesis.
Good thesis. Well, I certainly have found out that many of the different races of extraterrestrials, they know that humans are very volatile and very, very emotionally reactive, that we panic and we, we flail around when we're panicked. So, um, and a wonderful example of their knowing this is that one woman who had had quite a number of regressions, maybe 10 or 11 or 12 or so over a period of years. And she got to the point where she was happy that she was having these experiences with the beings, and she wanted to be totally awake and conscious through the whole next experience that she would have, trusting that she would have more. And so she sort of set her mind, okay, the next time they come for me and I'm taken, I'm going to absolutely stay awake. And they did come. They did lift her up out of her bed. They levitated her up out of her bed. And when she was awake, conscious. And then when she was being floated over the floor toward the wall, and she realized, she kind of looked down from where she was being floated in a prone position, and she looked down and could see that she was about 6 feet or so above the floor. And then she totally panicked, and she started flailing around.
Ah,
And the beings had with them a big net, like a fish net, she described it. That's what it reminded her. And they wrapped her up in that fishnet like a cocoon, and she couldn't really move her arms and her legs. And then they took her right through the wall and through space and onto the spaceship. And they said, as they were wrapping her up in this netting, they said, "We thought you might do this. We know how you humans are, and we don't want you to hurt yourself, and we don't want you to hurt us." So then they took her through the wall, and as soon as they got onto the spaceship, they stood her up again and unfurled all that webbing, so she was free to move. All of this was conscious for her, by the way. Yeah, which is so unusual. And then she had a really magnificent experience with a very, very high being who was there on the ship, who must have come from a very high spiritual dimension. He was just totally glowing with very vivid white light. And she had a conversation with him. I mean, so it turned out to be a really wonderful experience. But I thought that that was interesting and important to know, that they know how reactive and volatile and violent we can be when we think we need to protect ourselves. And I'm sure all the beings know that. And that probably is a huge reason why it seems like all the beings who take humans um, make them to be unable to move and unable to call out. And that is
yeah.
one of the distressing things for many people. Not all people react that way, but many people do. That, oh, they can't move, they can't call out, they can't wake the person who might even be sleeping in the bed next to them. And they don't like that. They feel sort of helpless. But when you look at the story that I just told you, which was a lady's real experience, it kind of makes more sense.
Yeah, it shows you the reactive nature of people, why disclosure has to be gradual. Billions of people could just freak out and threaten their religions or worldview. They panic. It's got to be gradual, it seems, from their view.
Yes, and I think it's true pretty much across the board that whenever one of us humans encounters some sort of life form that's really different that we don't know anything about, which is true with many of these beings, that we go into fear.
Yeah, that's kind of a natural reaction. Like if you saw a Bigfoot or something in the forest, like, ah,
Yeah, we don't know what that other thing, that other being is going to do, or if it can harm us, if it could kill us. Um, yeah, it's just very disturbing. I mean, that would be true if you were in the woods and encountered an animal that you didn't know about. You didn't know about the behavior of that animal, didn't even know what that animal was.
yeah, like yesterday I was out and I saw at a golf course and I saw a coyote walk by, a coyote pup. So I knew what it was. So, well, this is cute. Look at this coyote. So I wasn't afraid, because I knew what it was.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, and if you encounter a bear in the woods, you know it's a bear and you know it could come for you and maul you. Um, you know, but with this sort of thing, it's more baffling, I believe, because these beings are usually upright and two arms, two legs, and so forth, the way that we are. So they're kind of human-like in some ways, and yet very different. And how does a person know, how that being is going to behave or what they're going to do with you?
Yeah, and a human would know that's an alien. They would assume an alien's obviously going to be further advanced and more intelligent. So that's another reason to be scared as well. You know what they can do because they can do anything.
Right? Yes, if they're way beyond us in intelligence, good heavens, what's going to happen? Uh, so, with people who've done a whole series of regressions with me to their extraterrestrial experiences, they seem to become more relaxed about it because we go through a whole experience each time, a whole encounter from the first moments right through till they're being returned. And so they build up some a relaxed point of view, more confident. I mean, like if a person's gone through 10 regressions, uh, and they've all been different things going on, and different beings in some of them, but nothing that harmed them. And in fact, along the way, in some of those visits, they may have gotten some really wonderful help, like healing help, for instance, or teaching help, teaching some skills that they didn't know they had, like a whole range of psychic skills. And so then as more experiences happen, they don't go into all that fear because they've had good enough experiences to think, oh yeah, oh, I wonder what's going to happen this time. This is interesting. I mean, I was so pleased when a person gets to that point. And some of them get to the point where they really want more visits of this type. And they'll even say, I'm disappointed. I haven't had any visits from any of these beings for quite a while now. It might mean a year or two. And I miss them. I hope they're still wanting to work with me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And also, it seems like from all the work that I have done, it seems like people are not taken when they get to be about 70 or so years old. For a while, it looked like uh, women were being taken up till menopause. But since then, I've noticed that some of my women clients are older than menopause by 5 or maybe 10 years, and yet they still are taken. But the whole thing about menopause is that uh, those people and those beings who took them uh, were very, very interested in the reproduction program, the hybrid reproduction program, and were taking eggs from the woman or involving the woman more, like gestating the little embryo that had been made by eggs from the woman and sperm from a man, and then the extraterrestrial genetics added to that and implanted in the woman. So up till menopause, she could deal with all that physiologically. Yeah. There's a case here I'd like to mention too that just so unusual, and that there was a woman I worked with, and she had had a hysterectomy. So she was not a good candidate for being the mother of a hybrid baby. But anyway, the beings had previously, before the hysterectomy, had previously taken eggs from her ovaries and kept them in good storage. And so that she could be incubating a little embryo, which had been hybridized. And they did that. They put that little embryo with a mixture of extraterrestrial genetics in it, and they put that in her body. But because she didn't have her uterus anymore due to the hysterectomy, they made a uterus that would go into her body. And so there it was. Now, she knew she had the hysterectomy, of course, and knew she no longer had a uterus. So it was really a surprise that she was pregnant, and that was validated by her doctor.
Wow. How
Yeah.
old was she at that time, I wonder?
Oh, well, she was before menopause. She was probably in her maybe early 40s, right around there, that age, late 30s or early 40s. So she gestated that little embryo for 2 or 2.5 months, and then it was taken by the beings. And when they did that, when they removed the little embryo, uh, then they removed that artificial uterus, and she just went on with her life, you know,
Wow.
not pregnant, no,
Wow.
no more uterus, went right through menopause. So these beings can do really exceptional things.
Yeah, it's good you mentioned these rare cases, because people have heard the familiar cases. Those exceptions are important to know about.
Yes, yes. And
Okay.
and they sort of add to the mystery. I mean, especially her, she had no uterus, and yet here she was pregnant. And she
Yeah.
lost the other reproductive organs as well in that hysterectomy. But the beings are very clever. I mean, they must have wonderful storage facilities in order to take eggs and keep them for decades and some
Yeah.
before they combine them with male sperm and uh,
Yeah.
a new embryo.
Okay. I can explain the next part of my thesis about, I think what this whole process has been going on since, say, around 1850, is they want to result in humans that have a telepathic society, like their society is telepathic. They want us to be in tune with higher dimensions and more spiritually oriented. And I think part of this process, like it might be gradual, or hybrids will be introduced to Earth and they'll breed with Homo sapiens until the whole future is like a gray mind, a gray planet. Or many have described there could be a planetary event, like a cataclysm, a big event where there could be like a mass culling of billions of people. Like there could be great waves across the planet going 1,000 miles. Could be some type of cataclysm, which people are reluctant to talk about. And then the hybrids will be put on the planet and some humans would still survive, and then they would coexist, and then this process would continue. Have you heard about that possibility of a culling of the population of some kind?
Well, yes, I have, but I have not heard of that through my regressions to individual people's experiences. I've heard that just by other people discussing that possibility. Now, when a hybrid is created by those beings, sometimes they have told the person whose eggs or sperm are being taken for that purpose, that they're creating these hybrids for very good reasons, according to them. One of them is that they realize that we humans really could use some upgrading. One of the upgradings is not only intelligence, but really more upgrading in a spiritual perspective. That so many humans are just completely involved with the material world, and that they may have a belief in a god or something, but that generally speaking, they see humans as being not very spiritually aware, not being aware of other dimensions and other wonderful, exceptionally wonderful life in other dimensions. So they'd like to upgrade people, particularly in that way. And it's not so much to upgrade us in terms of building bigger and better technology, although sometimes they do help people with that. But it's more this spiritual awareness, spiritual point of view, that many of those beings, even the ones we don't think that they look like they'd be spiritually oriented, but some of the extraterrestrial species definitely are. And sometimes a person is visited by what seems to be physical extraterrestrial beings, and along with them, there might be a spiritual realm being, other dimensional being, and those beings are described by people I have regressed as glowing, like kind of like a human shape in some cases. So a being standing there, but not looking solid, looking almost transparent.
Yeah, it's
And
like an angel or a deva, right?
yeah,
Yeah, in Buddhism, the term deva means radiant one, so it sounds just like that glowing angelic being.
and sometimes that glowing being will not even be in a human shape with two arms and two legs, but standing upright and like a tall, thin, oval glow of
Oh,
light.
oh,
And then as the person looks more intently into that glow, they realize that, oh, that must be a being of some sort. I see a face. I see eyes and tiny little nose and little bitty mouth. And then they get the feeling that that being is looking right at them. I mean, there's a real connection. This is a living being, but seems to be in a more spiritual dimension. And then there might be other regular extraterrestrials in the room with that one. They sometimes seem to come together.
yeah, it seems they can work together, yeah. But I like what you're saying about they want the humans to be more spiritual, like your average human being, 8 billion of us, not that spiritually advanced. So I can understand if they want the new human to be more spiritual, there's 8 billion of us, maybe there will be a culling of the population. So you've heard that idea. How do you feel? I mean, it makes people kind of nervous, of course, thinking about a culling of. I've often thought, well, where do they take rebirth? If they take rebirth as humans on another planet, well, that's fine. I mean, they're going to take rebirth somewhere. It'd be nice if it'd be more reassuring if they could tell us where they're going to take rebirth, the average humans.
Yes, I have to say that that has not come up in all the work. The several thousand regressions I've done for extraterrestrial experiences.
Well, that's significant. If it hasn't come up, that's significant to note that.
No, and the various beings have given reasons for the hybridization program that they do. And among right at the top of the reasons why they do this hybridization is they say that their own race is failing and may be going into non-existence completely. And they don't want that, of course. And so they know that they need to meet with some sturdier stock. Some of them have actually said that, sturdier stock or more substantial physicality. And so they'll come to human beings and take some of the genetics from humans to mix with theirs in order to create hybrids that are more likely to persist in life.
Now, are
And
those grays that have that concern?
yeah, some of the greys, you see, there are so many types, and we don't necessarily know the names for them, but definitely some of them are described as these short grays. But there are other types too, even some of the more human-like types that are doing the hybridization because they want to save their own species. And then some have given other reasons for hybridization, such as creating beings who can be relating to humans on one hand and live here on Earth, and relate to that other planet where the other genetics have come from, and those beings on a spaceship, longer on a spaceship than most people stay, or on another planet. So, in other words, sort of a go-between. And those people, those kinds of hybrids, would be able to relate to humans because of the human genetics in them, and also relate to the other kinds of beings because they have their genetics too.
Yeah.
So there are these various reasons that are given. One of them is that the extraterrestrial beings, their species has been really in the long process of being destroyed because they have done so much space travel and picked up so much radiation, for generations, and that's very harmful, actually, to their species. It probably would be for ours too, if we did the amount of space travel going through the radiation belts and everything. Uh, but anyway, because of that radiation, their species has become weakened and in some cases unable to reproduce. And
Okay.
another group said that the reason for their hybridization was because they had done so much cloning to reproduce themselves instead of the regular way that their species had reproduced life. And so they've lost the ability to reproduce naturally and needed to have another mixture, sort of different type of intelligent life mixed with theirs. So they choose humans. We're good candidates for that, they think. So it's not just one program, and I frankly have not been aware through my work of any beings who are really dedicated to taking over the earth. But it's really worth mentioning that they do create hybrids who will live here on Earth as fellow human beings. And that's a wonderful subject in itself, which I've written about in 2 books. Meet the Hybrids for being one book, and Cosmic Convergence is my latest with Sheila Seppi. And these hybrids are a way of the extraterrestrials helping us on Earth, because they cannot come here themselves. They just would not stand our bacteria and viruses, our density, our air, our food, so they can't come here to help us. So they send emissaries to help us. And those emissaries we call walk-ins, because they did a soul exchange, very mutual, with a person who's been living here as a human and just really doesn't want to be in life anymore. So those 2 souls meet and plan a time and a place where they'll do an exchange. The original soul of the person living here will leave and go into the spirit realm, be just fine. And the incoming soul, the walk-in, comes in and takes up residence in that body and then gets to live, maybe 40, 50 more years of being able to help humanity. So I think it's a wonderful motivation that some of these, shall we say, more spiritually advanced extraterrestrial races who are very, very benevolent and very caring about humanity and Earth, it's a wonderful way of they're providing help here through these walk-ins. So
Yeah, I have to say, I have to include your walk-ins as part of my thesis now. Include that in my ET thesis. Yeah, that walk-ins is part of it. I agree with most of what you're saying, except my hypothesis does include the idea that the Greys need our our genes. Like I think the Greys are all over the galaxy, and they perhaps created us millions of years ago from various other genes. So I guess I don't think that they need our genes for the like. I think they can clone themselves, and if they want to combine with other genes, they can do that. So it seems like they're so far above us and so capable that they don't really need us. I think they're just trying to improve the world and improve the planet. So I wonder if maybe people just that you've regressed just have that assumption. They just assume that because the Greys are so small and spindly. Like I think it's a common assumption. People make, oh, they probably need us. They're here because they need us. I think maybe that's an assumption, but maybe it's not true. That's just my hypothesis.
yeah, and you know what? I think we don't absolutely know the details of that, because um, I can get what I hear from my clients being regressed and talking with the beings. And other than that, I don't know directly from the beings. So I just get these bits and pieces and sort of put it together. But there was a group of beings that worked with one of my clients and said, oh, we do this hybridization to help humans. In other words, to create these beings who are hybrids who can live on Earth,
Yeah.
human enough, and they will have many more abilities, like psychic abilities,
Yeah,
than
the world needs that.
most
Yeah.
humans do. And a particular kind of intelligence that could be used to help humanity. And so in that sense, it's sort of a gift to humanity from their point of view.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
But rather than taking over the world, um, I know David Jacobs has been convinced that hybrids are living here on Earth, and some of the experiencers have been very coached and urged to help those hybrids who are already here, who don't know very much about living on Earth. And so these experiencers are supposed to teach them basic things like how do you cook food or wash the dishes or get money from the bank or go shopping at the supermarket. But that has not been what has come through my work. David Jacobs and I know each other. We talk about this here and there. And that's always very interesting because it's like black and white. Um, so the hybrids are really done, I think, for a number of different purposes, depending on the extraterrestrial species. But some of them, I am totally convinced, are made as hybrids to live here on Earth, actually to be born here on Earth too, from human parents, and live a whole life of service to fellow human beings.
Yeah, I think so. I think
That's
the idea of a
what-
takeover has negative connotations, but maybe humanity agrees with this. There's a process, either conscious or unconscious. Humanity agrees with this, like we want this upgrade as well. So I think of it as a positive thing. I don't think of it as a negative takeover, but I think it's a process of transformation for humanity.
Right. Yes, I think so. Right.
Okay. I guess my feeling, a part of my hypothesis as well, is that the mantids are very wise. They're doing the wisest thing for Earth. Like if I had the choice between human governments like the World Economic Forum or the Mantis and the gray ETs, I would prefer ET leadership. I think it's more benevolent and wise compared to just left to human beings. But I also think that the human beings are probably governed by a negative form of reptilians. Like a lot of good reptilians, but I think the globalists, like the Rothschild globalist cabal, is probably controlled by dark reptilian species. That's a common theory. Like David Icke has that theory.
It
So
is.
it's kind of those two forces, good and bad. There's these negative forces on the Earth, and then these good ETs trying to transform us with the hybridization process. You could comment on that.
Yeah, well, it's such a varied picture. And again, my point of view is limited to the people I work with, do the regressions with. Um, I know there are a lot of theories that I have heard elsewhere um, about reptilians uh, influencing our government leaders and influencing our power people, very, very wealthy elites, and that whole reptilian influence is behind there. Uh, I cannot say from my own work, I cannot say that's true or it's not true, but it certainly seems like it could be. And so that's definitely, I think, not a good thing. It would be more wonderful if some of the more high-minded, altruistic, benevolent ETs could have more influence. And maybe they do have a lot of influence on Earth that we don't really recognize as such. But I think that we really would do well to have more positive influence from the really benevolent, very high-minded ones.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can't prove the reptilian influence, but I think there's evidence for it. I think that's going on. I think one theory about like people often ask, well, if these ETs are so good, why don't the good ETs stop the bad ETs? But my Buddhist answer to that is the law of karma pretty much governs all beings in the universe. So on this earth, like the lion eats the gazelle, it's just the karma. There's good and bad, and it's our karma that we were born into this world. It's our karma we're born in this conflicted world. So we shouldn't expect good ETs just to make a heaven on earth for us. We have to play out our karma, and they allow the reptilians to do what they're doing. And I guess people have a choice. So I think it's the law of karma that just allows that. So we shouldn't expect the good ETs to just push away the bad ETs and make everything beautiful and wonderful. You could comment on the law of karma if you like.
Right, and many of the ETs have said to the people I regress that you humans seem to be waiting for some of us to come in and save the world. And we're watching the world. We're caring. We're concerned about the world. But it's up to you. It's your earth. It's up to you guys to work out your own problems. And we're kind of standing by and doing a lot of watching from a distance. But it's really up to you.
Yeah, and the way they're kind of helping behind the scenes, like you talked before about the prime directive, they're not overtly interfering, but they're bringing in like star seeds and they're bringing in hybrids, sort of indirectly behind the scenes, which are going to help.
Right. There's three methods that you just mentioned: the walk-ins, the starseed people, and the hybrid people. All are part of this big program from the extraterrestrials to help us, to help ourselves. And
Yeah.
knowing a lot of these people, walk-ins and starseeds and hybrids, I mean, I think we're very, very blessed to have these people, living here fully as humans and yet having extraterrestrial ingredients in them.
Yeah, it's like we're in good hands. I trust the Mantid ET wisdom and the process, what they're doing. So I think we're in pretty good hands. So I'm optimistic about the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I sent my hypothesis to Dr. Rudy Shield at Harvard Smithsonian. He said it was the most comprehensive hypothesis yet seen. So I thought that was a great compliment. So he allowed me to post that on my website.
What was the compliment?
Well, he said that my ET hypothesis of sources was the most comprehensive that he's seen. He thought it made the most sense.
Oh, very good. Well, I know Rudy Shield
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've
and
had him as a guest. We've done videos.
his wife Jane, and wonderful, wonderful people. And he accompanied Dr. John Mack at Harvard.
Yeah, I really supported him.
Um,
Yeah.
Started going to him after working with some experiencers, and he would check with Rudy about the astrophysics that some of the people he regressed were talking about. And that drew Rudy into this whole field of interest. And he's, of course, become extremely interested.
Yeah, he helped Susie Anson with her book, The Dual Soul Connection. He added to her book. Yeah.
And he helped Ray Hernandez with
Yeah.
that wonderful book and that wonderful book. And oh, they're just lovely people.
Yeah, these are great sources. Yeah.
Yeah, as
Yeah,
well as
I quoted Ray Hernandez, my sources. He quotes Dr. Kenneth Ring in 1992. He said that the UFOs and ETs are agents of cultural deconstruction. So that was very meaningful to me, that in the sense they have to deconstruct our culture to create this new hybrid society in the future. Like our current culture is kind of moribund or violent or not very spiritual. So it makes me think, well, maybe part of what the globalists are doing, part of it might be good. Of course, part of it's bad, but maybe part of this globalist top-down influence on our world, part of it might be for ET inspired to be agents of a cultural deconstruction to change our culture. So that's a controversial theory. What do you think of that?
well, I certainly think it's possible. I don't know if it's going on like that or not for that reason, but yeah, I think it's just good to consider that, as a real possibility.
Yeah, that the ET influence is going to change our culture. We're not going to be the same sort of conservative Christian culture or other cultures as well, but we're going to have some type of global culture or something more telepathic, more spiritual, more in tune with higher dimensions. So it's going to be a different human culture than what we have now.
It would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would be quite different,
Yeah.
shockingly different.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of my thesis too is I'm uncertain about this, like to what extent are globalists doing like good ET work or bad reptilian work. But I still, even though I'm uncertain, I feel I have to go ahead with my mission is to raise awareness about the ET agenda for human advancement, to raise awareness that there is this ET influence, whether you like it or not. as a society, we should discuss it. We should talk about it. This is like the highest thing going on, most important issue, I would say.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good for you for bringing all this out and stimulating people's thought.
Well, you've been doing it for 30 years, 34 years. So you've added so much to this. Yeah, it's a real honor just to have your feedback on my thesis because I only have a thesis. I'm willing to change it tomorrow with new evidence. That's where I like to consult experts like you with any feedback that you have, you know?
Okay, and I don't think there's any one human being who knows the whole picture. That's why discussions like this are so valuable, because you get different points of view from people who know from different sources. My source is, primarily the people that I have regressed.
And you also cite your research, like you have your actual direct sources of people, but then you have your own views based upon other research as well. So it's good how you divide the two. You say, well, this is what the clients have told me, and this is what your own research or other people you've learned from other people. You describe that. That's good.
Yeah, and I frankly have been all these years appreciating other people who know about these things from other points of view. And I mean, that is incredibly valuable. I learn a lot from them, and hopefully they learn some from me.
Yeah. So the next thing I talked about in my thesis is dealing with disinfo agents in the UFO community. Like Richard Dolan made a point that in the UFO field more than others, there's this feeling of floating because people know the government's hiding the truth or they're lying to us, so we have to kind of figure it out. So it's a ground where there can be disinfo agents or con artists making stuff up and misleading people. So I think that's part of the reality that in the UFO community there's either like a government disinfo, which they might feel they're doing it for a good purpose, have gradual disclosure to slow things down. Then there's just con artists that make stuff up and people just believe stuff. So that's an issue as well, I think, dealing with disinfo agents.
Oh, yes. I mean, with any subject, there are many, 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 many points of view. This is certainly true in regard to this subject. Um, but I personally value what comes out in a regression when a person is actually with the extraterrestrial beings. And then we can surmise from that what their agenda is. Or sometimes the people in the regression can actually talk with the beings. It's done telepathically. They never hear a voice coming out of a mouth, but they can hear it in their own head. And that suggests that we humans have the ability to do telepathic communication.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very typical when I'm regressing a person and the person is on a medical type table on the ship, and all kinds of things are being done to that person who's just lying there. And after a while, I very often will say uh, to the person, uh, would you like to know what they're doing and why? And the person invariably says, yes, I certainly would like to know. And I say, well, you can talk to them. You can ask them out loud with your words, or you can just think the question.
So that's like going beyond time, even though it happened 10 years ago or more. Like in the present moment, you're saying they can ask them a question and get an answer.
Yeah,
That's an amazing concept, isn't it?
I know. I mean, I cannot explain how that works, but it certainly seems to the person and to me, it certainly seems like that person is reliving that experience that could have happened 2 years ago or 20 or 30 or 50. Um, you know, so I take some care during the relaxation process, leading them into the regression. I take some care to uh, get the details of where they were, how old they were they alone, were they with somebody else, when one of these experiences started. And so I go back over that. Like if it happened during childhood, I'll give the details that I'd already collected from the person in conversation. Like okay, going back to that night when you were age 6 and you were sleeping out in the backyard in a tent with your little friend Tommy, and that you saw this bright, bright light coming down. And the next thing you knew, it was morning, and you didn't know what happened about that very bright light. That's just one example of hundreds. And so the person being regressed, starts to develop that person. Oh, yeah, I'm that age, I'm that kid, I'm in the tent. Not I was in the tent, but I am in the tent. And little Tommy is next to me. We each have our own sleeping bags. And my little dog is right outside the flap of the tent guarding us. And I'm seeing this, I'm waking up and I'm seeing this incredibly bright, bright light coming down toward us in the tent. I have no idea what it is. I've never seen such a bright light. It's coming closer and closer. Now it's even coming into the tent. And, they'll just describe it moment by moment. It's really an adventure each time. In my point of view, I've done so many of these, but it's still an adventure, and everybody's experience has different details in it. And there are some commonalities too, but there's a great deal of variation. Like, for instance, sometimes people are just taken for a medical checkup or for healing if they have something wrong. Sometimes they're taken and there is none of that, but that they're being coached and taught and, revved up on certain skills that they may not even known they had here on Earth. But anyway, you get kind of a tune-up and a teaching and coaching. Sometimes none of that happens, but they're taken to visit their hybrid children who are living on the ship and to have an opportunity to at least develop a little bit of relationship with their own hybrid children, as well as to see a big group of other hybrid children who their children are with. And some of them really follow the development of the hybrid child, and in the sense that the person is taken many, many times and over a period of years as the child is getting older. So the mother, for instance, might have met that hybrid child when the child was a newborn baby, and then maybe a few months later, and then a few months after that, and maybe every year for all the years that that hybrid child is growing up on the ship, and so that they have a chance to know each other. And they have come to realize that hybrid children need to have some contact with the human parent, usually the mother, because they have the human genetics in them, and humans need that. They need good contact with their mother. Some of these mothers would just love to bring their hybrid children back to Earth and live here, but they're always told, no, no, this
They
child will
can't.
not
Yeah.
survive there. Yeah, they're not human enough in proportion to survive there. Your bacteria, your viruses, your pollution, your air, your food, they would not survive. So they'll remain with us.
Yeah, I trust that source, like your regression of those. I think that's a good source. It's honest. It's not something economist just makes up because they're under hypnosis. But yeah, getting back to like sources like disinfo agents, like Richard Dolan was saying, like he was saying, for example, people claim to have been in the secret space program. He says the reason why they're not, punished by the government, put in jail for talking about being in the secret space program is because what they're saying is not true. And then 2022, Corey Goode was good enough to come out and admit he was in a court case saying, look, this is my intellectual property. I just made this stuff up. It's not true. Just made up. So it's good that he admitted it. There's like hours and hours of 6 hours of his testimony about this and how he's working with Gaia TV and he just made it up. Now he's suing that other guys are saying it, like Michael Jacko and others and Tony Rodriguez. He's, hey, that's my intellectual property. So I appreciate him, saying that he just made it up. So I think a lot of people understand the UFO community. Well, this, like Stephen Bassett commented on this one of my videos. He said, well, when there's an information vacuum, people fill the vacuum with stuff, so they kind of make stuff up. But that's part of the UFO environment. One thing I want to mention: Michael Jacko had one video on Gaia TV, and he shows he's under hypnosis, and on the end of the Zoom is you. You're there, but you didn't say anything. So I don't know. Did you actually do a regression with Michael Jacko?
I did.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because I think like he said he was worked on Mars for 13 years. Then they was, they say in the 20 back program, their bodies regress 20 years, then they go back 20 years in time, so they're only away for 15 minutes. Like Richard Dolan and I and others, we don't believe this. We think people are just making this stuff up. I don't know.
The thing is, there are quite a few people who are claiming that. And there could be, in my point of view, there certainly could be a program like that. And we do know that there's an age regression ability. In fact, in Southern California, La Jolla, there is a facility that specializes in age regression. Now,
I didn't know about this.
Yeah, as far as I know, this is true. And there are people I know who have validated that, who know that facility is there. So, in other words, putting extraterrestrials aside right now, people who really maybe they're getting older and they have a lot to contribute still, and yet they're, becoming less agile in mind and body, that they have the opportunity to go through a process called age regression. So in other words, they could take off about 40 or 50 years of their lives and still be like a young adult, and then be able to carry on the work that they feel very inspired to do. So if that's true for those people, it could very well be true for the secret space program people.
Well, I think there is. I think there's a real secret space program. Richard Owens talked about a breakaway civilization. I think that's true, but I think these guys on Gaia TV, I don't believe that. Also, because some of the specific things they're saying, like they always talk about these evil Nazis in outer space. The Nazis are on the asteroid series. Like Tony Rodriguez was asked, "Are you afraid that the Nazis are going to take over the world?" He said, "No, because they believe they already control the world through the international bankers, who they control." But this doesn't make sense to me, because I think the Rothschild bankers, they were part of World War II. They're the ones who destroyed the Nazis. I don't think the Nazis control them. So they make up these incredible stories of Nazis in space. So for various reasons, I don't buy those particular guys. I think there really is a secret space program. But like Richard Dolan said, if there is a real secret space program, you can't come out on video and talk about it. Otherwise, the government's going to stop you. They're going to put you in jail. But the reason why these guys aren't stopped is because what they're saying isn't true. At least that's his perspective on it.
Okay. And I don't know whether it's true or not.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, but yeah, that's just part of my wider point that in the whole UFO field, there's government disinfo and then there's probably private disinfo, just something we have to work with. But I remember my Buddhist monk teacher saying, just teach right view. You don't have to argue with everybody who you think has wrong Buddhist views, just teach right view. So the Buddha advice not to get in too much dispute over views. So maybe that's good advice for me. Maybe I do too much of that.
Right. But I think it's wonderful that uh, you think about all these things, you really engage with them and think of different possibilities um, and bring it out to people. I think that's a really good service.
Yeah, I try to have the highest standard of truth I can on it. That's why I always invite cross-examination. I say, if anybody thinks I'm wrong, give me evidence. I'll change my mind in a minute if I have good evidence. So I'm always flexible. I don't say, oh, this is the truth. I've got it figured out. I don't, like you said, no one human being knows it all. I agree with that.
Right. Yeah. Do you ever get feedback that changes your point of view?
I get a lot of feedback. Um, well, mainly I'm listening to experiences, but the feedback I mainly get is comments on BitChute. A lot of them are quite negative about it. Like I prefer to be on YouTube, but have better, more intelligent comments. I think on
Uh,
YouTube they're more concerned about the globalists. It's all a conspiracy. So I don't get too much good feedback from BitChute comments, I would
uh,
say. But I
Interesting.
like to listen to experiencers, particularly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's the way that we can learn the most. Although, when a person is abducted by extraterrestrials, those beings are not going to, if they have a plan for the world, if it's like to take over the world or substitute hybrids for humans eventually, they don't and probably wouldn't say that to the person. But they're very good about pointing out, some of the problems that we have here and really telling us, to clean up our act, so to speak. But that we have to do it themselves. And they certainly show signs that they're caring, many of those types. And in other words, we are being known. I feel convinced about this. We humans on Earth are being known in much more detail than we think we are. You
Yeah,
know,
they know us better than we know ourselves, right?
Yes. And one extraterrestrial told me years ago now, through channeling of a different person, um, uh, said that we know as much as we want to know about anything on Earth, and we do it remotely.
So the ETs do it remotely.
Yeah, so he didn't say remote viewing, but he said we just do it remotely.
So they
So
don't have to take a like with a flying saucer, they go anywhere in the world and within minutes, Antarctica or anywhere. But you're saying they can even do it remotely, like with their consciousness or something, they can just see.
that's the impression I get from that. And this came up because uh see, this is around 1994. I was in England researching the crop circles. And I had done that for a few years. I did it for 27 years,
Yeah, you're an expert on crop circles.
going to crop circles in England. But anyway, one of those, it might have been a little later in the 1990s. Um, I went to a crop circle with three friends in England, and it had a whole new feature that we had never seen in any other crop circle. It within the big pattern had about three circles that were made with the wheat kind of woven, not just laid down, but like woven in a ring that sort of stood up about 4 inches, and then little what looked like nests of the laid down wheat in each one. And and so the next time I was engaged with the channeling, with which my client did, and talking to that extraterrestrial being, uh, he said, "Oh, Barbara, was intrigued by how fascinated you were with that particular crop circle, with the ring and the little nests. And I was aware of you calling your friends over and all four of you down on your hands and knees and looking at these features and thinking, how could that possibly have been done? How could that have been made in the middle of the night and be so perfect? And I said, yeah, what you're describing is so accurate. Were you there somehow? And he said, no, no, I've never been on Earth. I just know these things remotely.
Oh, there you go. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, their minds are so vast. Think of the mind of a mantid or an ancient gray. The minds are so vast, we can't guess what they can encompass with their consciousness.
Right. So his saying what he said, and I've just repeated that, uh, reminds me to think that, maybe it's possible that we are being observed and known by many beings, without our even being aware of it. If they do that remotely from their own planets or their own spaceships.
Yeah, I think so. It must be quite a show. They're probably really watching us like we're an important planet. I think to them, this is an important planet.
Right. It is an important planet. And what's been pointed out from one of these beings, well, the same one who did the channeling, is that we have more species and subspecies and subspecies on this planet. We have more of that than all of the other planets that have life put together. So we are considered very, very, very special.
Yeah, see that I want to ask about that. Like that's not part of my hypothesis. I always thought planet Earth is just um, another typical planet in a typical galaxy. Like there's supposedly like 3 trillion galaxies. Each galaxy has billions of planets. So if we compare our planet to like 3 trillion times hundreds of billions of planets, I can't see the arithmetic. How could we have more species on our one planet than all these other 3 trillion galaxies combined? Like I can't believe it. How could that be mathematically? How does that add up?
Well, I don't know, but when you think about the planets that we know about, just a few that we really know something about, um, they're not bursting with life. I mean, when you think about plant life and insect life and fish life and bird life and so forth, all kinds of life, um, we, at least I have never heard of another planet that has very much of that. I've heard of planets that have maybe one or two type of animals and maybe one or two types of plants, but not any that is just bursting with so many kinds of life that we have here. And they recognize that as our being sort of a gem, because we have so much life.
So what's the source of this? This is through regression. People have said that. Like, what's the source?
The beings have said that in regressions.
So like the Greys have said that?
Um, I'm not remembering exactly which kinds have said that, but it's come up a few times in
Okay.
regressions. And it was really made a point of by this being who did the channeling through the woman I was working with.
Oh, so it could be a channeled source then, right?
Yeah, so I was having conversations with that extraterrestrial being, and it went on for a period of 10 or 11 years.
Oh,
Yeah, so I mean, I was absolutely thrilled. And the woman who was channeling him always claimed that she didn't know that material. She wasn't sliding in the material. It was really coming from this other being.
yeah. Well, I think of channel sources, though. There's so many channel sources, and they often contradict each other. So I think of channel sources as dubious. And you've had like over 3,000 clients, and you say only a few have mentioned that. So yeah, take that into consideration because I think of like we only know the 8 other or 7 other planets in our solar system, but as far as the rest of the galaxy and other galaxies, there must be many like Earth-like planets with other humanoids. So I would think, there must be lots of life out there. So I wouldn't think that our planet would have more than all other planets in the universe combined. That's too much, too much for me to take on board.
Well, even though there may be planets with human-like beings, Well, there are, like the Pleiades, some of the Pleiades.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, uh, whatever the other planet is, it may have a good population of human-like beings. They may not have the millions of different types of species that we do. They
Yeah.
may have a good number of species, which sustains their lives, but apparently we have much more than anybody else. And as this being said, more than all the planets in existence. You
Well,
know,
I think we're special. I think Earth is special. To aliens, I think we're special. Like Susie Hansen has said, the Grace told her that, planet Earth is part of a bunch of planets and it can't be allowed to go down. Like we're spiritually retrograde, but they have to intervene because they can't allow us to blow up the planet. Like it's necessary because the relationships with other planets, which seems kind of mysterious, but we can't be allowed to fail. They have to redeem this planet. So yeah, I think we're a very important planet, a special planet.
yes, yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean we're better than the other planets, but we are special. I can appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, take it for granted, don't we? I mean,
Yeah, we take it for granted, right? Astronauts go out into space and we look so fragile, we shouldn't be taking it so for granted.
yeah, I know. I mean, we grow up knowing a lot about the Earth and learning more and more about it and about different species and everything. But still, at least for me growing up, I just thought, well, that's natural and that's the only life there is. And isn't it amazing? There's so much different kinds of life here. Uh, but I didn't think until maybe the last 34, 35 years or so uh, that there were really, really other civilizations out there living complete lifetimes and many of them being extremely intelligent
Yeah,
and with not so many species.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the next part of my hypothesis at the end, I gave my sources, and you're part of my sources. I sourced one interview Richard Dolan did with you around 2019, and he noted that you have a much more positive view of the ETs compared to, David Jacobs, who had more of a negative view. So you're part of my sources. Another source I quote is Susie Hansen, her book, The Dual Soul Connection. I watched, she got about 65 videos on her Susie Hansen channel. So she's been a big source to me about the, deep, profound details about the Greys and the Mantids and their whole program going on.
Good. Very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Do you want to comment on any of I got other sources as well, like Jeff Silver here in Vancouver. He's got a book called The Rising and the Alien Plan to Build Enlightened Society on Earth. I've done videos with him. He's one that actually introduced me to Susie Hansen. So these two really got me whole pointed in this direction, because I remember back in 2009, I remember studying David Jacobs thinking, this is pretty bad, but he had a real influence on me. I had kind of a negative influence at that time. So they really gave me more of a positive influence,
Huh. Yeah, well, I think it's a multifaceted program. There are lots of different kinds of extraterrestrial beings, and they all have their own agendas. So, whatever David Jacobs says about the people he's worked with, I would have no right in the whole world to say that doesn't exist. It may very well exist. And so do the things that my people come up with their extraterrestrial visits. So there's multiple agendas going on the part of those beings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we're lucky I think, to get a glimpse here and a little piece there and kind of put it together, realizing that none of us know everything about this.
Yeah. Well, one thing I got from Jeff Silver, he described something even higher than the mantids. He was brought in a craft, and in one corner of the room, they had this big spherical light, and they said, "This is our God." So he says it's kind of in tune with the quantum field, and they might have something almost like an AI quantum computer, although it's probably more than a computer, it's something sentient, this kind of this AI sort of or this sphere of light was which was like they regard as their kind of god or attuned with the quantum field, what Buddhists might say is nirvana. So that's an influence on my worldview. Maybe they have some, they get so in touch with this at a quantum level that they can use this like a quantum computer to get actual guidance for humanity, guidance for the world, or guidance what the mantids and grays are doing from that kind of field.
Oh, that's an interesting series of thoughts.
Yeah,
You're a real
yeah,
thinker.
yeah. Some other sources, the Constant Contact Research Institute, we talked about Ray Hernandez, he's the director. I've interviewed about 10 of them, you know. So I think what I like about them is they've interviewed like 4,350 experiences, quite a large scale, at least mid-scale study with questionnaires of 600 or 700 questions. And 85% of the people were asked, you know, if you could stop this ET contact, would you? And they said no. They've had positive experiences. Some have had like psychological healings or spiritual healings, physical healings, you know, just transformational experiences. I guess you'd concur with that.
And some of them seem to be very nice to be with. I mean, maybe at first, when a person is first coming to grips with the fact that he or she is having experiences with these very unusual beings. And again, the fear factor comes in because we have no idea, what is their intent? What are they going to do to me? And I mean, I would have that too, I'm sure. But after realizing what has been going on, and they don't need to be afraid because they're not going to be harmed or killed, uh, some people develop a very positive relationship with those beings. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and what I like about constant contact research is it's not just relying on an anecdote there or a story there. At least they've interviewed, I think, now up to about 5,000 people. So you get a broad base of, and there's some consistency in the experiences, how most of it's quite positive.
Mm.
And you've got 3,000 people. Another source I have is Mary Rodwell. I think she's worked with about 3,000 families. And
Yep.
similar to you, quite positive experiences that she has quite a positive impression of the ETs and the
Oh,
agenda as well.
oh, yes, yes. And the star kids, they said, so you see, star kids and star seeds are people who are born here and they live with a regular family, grow up with a regular family, and live their whole lives here. And they have had previous lifetimes when they were one of those extraterrestrial types living in an extraterrestrial society. So there's a connection, sort of genetically, historically, and very often they will have primarily experiences with the beings whom they were one of uh, long ago in another lifetime, or even in a whole series of lifetimes in some cases. So that's very interesting to the person, the starseed person, to recognize that. And that often comes out in regression.
Yeah, yeah. With you and Mary Rodwell's clients, right?
Yeah, that the beings who will take one of those starseed people for an experience will say to the person, you know, you are one of us. You're just living a life as a human right now, but you come from us. And usually um, those people have come to really, really like those extraterrestrial beings. And so they're very happy to hear that they used to be one. It makes complete sense to them.
Yeah. Yeah, Starseeds is a great source of, I mean, for now we got over like 10,000 witnesses. There's your work, Mary Rodwell's Constant Contact Research. That's over 10,000 interviews interviewed, and there's lots of other people have interviewed and give testimony and made videos. So that's a lot of sources to base a hypothesis on.
Yes, yes, it is. Right.
Another source I quote is Timothy Good. He's quite a well-respected British UFO researcher, and in one of his interviews, he was being asked, why do you think the governments have to keep this a secret? Well, he says, well, it seems to be there's a hybridization program under work. The aliens want to put hybrids on Earth to basically, replace us or take over the world. Even though he's not sure whether that's a bad thing or a good thing, but said, don't you think people would find that upsetting? Of course, the government's going to keep this a secret. They don't want to give full disclosure. It should be obvious why you would understand the governments want to keep this a secret. So that was his view as well. He thinks there's a hybridization program underway as well.
Right. And I mean, all that I know about the hybridization program is that it's very, very benevolent.
I
But
think so.
but there are these other points of view, like David Jacobs, where he thinks that the hybrids are here to take over the world eventually.
But that he even admits, he talks about the positives point of view. He said, well, maybe it could be a good thing. He said, I think it's a bad thing. But he even in himself was, well, maybe that could be a good thing. He wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we've had long discussions about this sort of thing.
Is there any video interviews of you two together, you and Dr. David Jacobs?
Well, not an interview, but we were both presenting at the International UFO Congress in the year 2016, February, I think. And he gave a talk on a Wednesday, and I gave a talk on Thursday with the opposite point of view about hybrids, and having some of my hybrids there with me to tell their own story. And then on the next day, Friday, there was a panel discussion with David and me and Joe Lewells, just the three of us. So we went back and forth about, what's going on with these hybrids. Are they here for good, or are they here to take over the world? And it was very clear that we had very different points of view about that. So I just said, well, maybe all of the above is true. We don't know. Maybe there are David's kind of hybrids going on, and they're my type, and they're just totally opposite.
That'd be a good video. Is that video on YouTube somewhere, or is it a private video like they have to buy?
Well, you'd probably have to buy it through the International UFO Congress in the year
16, eh?
2016.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But have you had private conversations with David Jacobs as well?
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, we certainly did that weekend, that week for that conference, because we were both there for the whole time. And I've met him other places, where he's been out in California for speaking engagements, and I've sometimes had dinner with him afterwards or talked to him afterwards. And yeah, we're very aware of each other. We met way back in about 1993 or 1994, when I had been doing this work with experiencers for maybe 3 years or 4, but quite a remarkable number of people, and already knew a whole lot. And David and I were on a television program and waiting in the green room. And that's where I actually met him for
Oh,
the
wow.
first time. Yeah. And he said, he was aware of all these very negative things going on with the hybrids. And, and with the whole program, the whole extraterrestrial encounter program. And I said, well, I'm regressing a lot of people, probably 50 people by that time, at least. And they're very frightened at first, but they find out during the regression that there are a lot of good things that go on too. And he said, well, you must be doing it wrong. You must be leading the hypnosis wrong,
I
because you're not getting all these horrible things.
think maybe he's leading it wrong.
Yeah. So over the years, I've thought about this from time to time, of course, and it may just be that people who are drawn to doing regression work with me turn out to have positive experiences and learn a lot from it, sometimes very much appreciate them. And people who go to him just happen to be much more negatively oriented about their experiences. I don't think that I influence people in a regression. I let it all come from that person. And I don't know about David. I've never witnessed one of his regressions, whether he's sort of encouraging them to think of just the negative stuff. I don't know how that works.
Well, Ray Hernandez told me in one of my videos with him that he said David Jacobs would turn away people with positive experiences and get someone else to interview them, that he only want to interview people with negative experiences.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I
But
guess that's it for my my hypothesis and my sources. But you did point out that they might have multiple agendas. There's so many different types of aliens; they could have different agendas. I would agree with that, but I think there's probably some type of federation of planets that governs beings even with different agendas. They might say, "Okay, you have a different agenda, but you can't just land on the White House lawn. You can't scare." The
yeah.
humans. They probably have some level of control. Though I think it's probably true that there's probably different aliens with different agendas.
Oh, yeah. I'm convinced of that. Absolutely. And I really do think that there is this galactic federation that you're talking about, and made up of many, many, many different species from different planets from all over. And they actually get together in big council meetings. And they would love to see us on Earth evolve enough to justify being a member of the Galactic Federation. And that would be so interesting for us as well. But they say, as long as you have crime and greed and murders and wars and nuclear proliferation used as a threat all over the world, and so many of our dysfunctional things, that we do not deserve to be part of that great galactic federation. And many of the species would really like to see us evolve enough so that we could belong to that federation.
Yeah, the same view that if we survive this process, the end process will be once the new hybrids in place in the world, then we'll be ready to join the galactic community. We'll be part of the galactic community. We'll be more open at that point. Be like Star Trek, be something really wonderful, wonderful future.
Yeah. So we'll see, won't we? How
Yeah,
things go, how it all develops. But in the meantime, it's important for us humans to get our act together. And that's a big challenge because we've got so many different factions in the world that are all butting heads. And but anyway, God bless us.
yeah. Humanity's always been that way, right? One group competing with another, fighting another, taking over the other group. Yeah, but yeah, that's my whole thesis and sources. So anything else you'd like to add to it? But we did a really thorough. I really want to thank you. Did a really thorough job of analyzing each section of my hypothesis, and you added it to it, like with the walk-ins. That's one of the components that I think is part of the good news of the ET presence.
Okay, yeah, I think so too. Yes, there is one more thing I'd like to add, and that is that um, some of my clients in regression have gone to council meetings that are out in space with other kinds of beings. They usually seem to be on some sort of spaceship. I mean, it's
Like maybe one of these here in orbit.
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, but yeah, some of them have gone to a meeting that seems to have maybe 10 or 12 different species of ET beings on it, and they're the only human, and they are often asked for advice about humans. And so one woman went to a meeting like that, was taken to it, And there were maybe about 4 other beings. 2 of them were just, as she described them, just blue color and absolutely sparkling with light. She was so, and the sparkles made little tinkle sounds, very pleasant. And she was so focused on these 2 who were sitting opposite her uh, that she just couldn't really pay attention to the questions that they were asking her about Earth and humans. And yeah, there have been about 6 different regressions I've done with different people, where they've gone to some sort of council meeting. But one woman in her regression was taken on board a big craft. It seemed like a big one, and put into a pod, like a bathysphere, of some sort of special liquid that went up almost to the top of the bathysphere. And she was able to be completely submerged and breathe in that liquid and not be harmed at all. And it seemed, from her point of view, like the travel in that bathysphere, which was in a ship, that it seemed like it went on for a couple of days. And then the whole ship stopped moving, and the hatch was open, and she was taken out of that ship, and then dried off, and then, of course, spitting out the remainder of the fluid she'd been breathing in. And then she was dressed in a robe and with a hood that came out very stiffly past her face, and was taken to quite a long walk in that ship to a huge council meeting. I would guess that that was the Galactic Federation meeting, but it wasn't labeled in the regression. But anyway, she was a delegate from Earth, along with 4 other people who had been in those bathyspheres traveling that distance. And they were all together, delegates from Earth at this great council meeting. And one of the things being discussed was what they should do, what the other beings should do about planet Earth, about the mistake that they had made a long time ago with helping to create human beings who could live on Earth. And because they allowed, in that mixture, they allowed the characteristics of greed and warlikeness and pugnacious, like it, and with some people the right to just take any other person's life. And they could see that that was playing out very, very seriously, and might even result, in blowing up the whole Earth with nuclear material. And so the quandary was, what should they, the beings, do about this problem on planet Earth with these human people? And should they intervene somehow and take out that genetic quality of warlikeness and opposition and greed and so forth, or should they not interfere, as was the major principle? So I think that's going on. I mean, and interesting that as we face all these different things that we're experiencing here on Earth, from one nation to another, one faction, one political party against the other, and so forth, so many oppositions. And to know that those beings out there are aware of this and are concerned, wondering if they should do something about this.
You wonder, are they doing something or not? It's like it seems to be a question, still a question, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know, except they're doing the walk-ins and the starseeds and the hybrids.
Yeah, doing a lot behind the scenes. Yeah, it's not so overt.
Yeah, these are being given to us. And so I think there's a lot of altruism that's actually happening in that way.
Yeah, I think so. This has been great. Anything else you want to add, Barbara? We've been at it not quite 2 hours, but it's very thorough talk. I really appreciate your feedback and your wisdom, your knowledge, your expertise. At this a long time.
Thank you. Yes, and I keep learning more with every single person I work with. And, more and more people are coming these days to find out their real spiritual purpose for being here in this lifetime. Because more people are aware that they really are souls who incarnate on different planets at different times, and that there's a purpose for each lifetime, a purpose for the person to learn and accomplish. And so there are more people waking up to the fact that somehow their soul chose them to come into human life for a particular purpose, for helping in a particular way. So I've just noticed in the last year or two that many of the people come to me anyway, who want regressions. It's not so much to go to an extraterrestrial experience, but to knowing, who they really are and what they had decided as a soul.
Yeah, the purpose.
Yeah, so that they can just get on with their purpose. So those people typically are in their 40s or 50s or 60s, and they've worked for many years in many cases, and they've had children, raised children, and now it's time to think about why I am really, really here. And I frankly think that that's wonderful. And very often the person will change what he or she is doing in life, uh, change it substantially after having one of these regressions, because the higher self, or we could call it the soul wisdom of the person, we can access that in regression, and that part of the person can remind the person that, oh yeah, they had decided to come here and be a physical healer, for instance. That's happened with many of them. Or they have come to really help to educate the world about the reality of the other beings. And with some of them, it's that they've come to help the world to know about a particular group of beings that soul used to be a being with in previous lifetimes. So when this all started coming to me about people having been extraterrestrials in past lives, that was really an opener for me. And there have been quite a number of people.
Did that happen early in your career, or is that more lately?
Yes, that happened before I even knew that there was such a thing as extraterrestrial beings coming here. I
Wow.
even knew that there were any in existence. I mean, I had, seen a couple of the movies like E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I loved, both of those. But I
Yeah.
thought it was all completely science fiction. But in my regular therapy practice, after I started learning past life regression therapy in the mid 1980s, um, in regressions that I did with a couple of them, well, three of them actually, um, that it turned out in the regression that they themselves were an extraterrestrial being.
You mean in a previous life?
Yeah.
Wow.
And in each of those three cases, eventually, as the extraterrestrial in a past life, they came to planet Earth. And once they got here and lived on planet Earth, in most of these cases, then that meant that the next lifetime they would incarnate as a human on Earth. Because when you come here to live for a while, you build up karma. And then the law of things is that in a subsequent life, you're supposed to take care of that karma and learn and evolve. And you may do that with some aspects of karma, but then, you may be creating some negative karma in another way, not intending to, but you just do. And then you have to come back to take care of that karma. And so that sort of leads to a whole chain of lifetimes as being a human.
That could be a big decision coming to human birth. It could be a big loss from their previous existence too.
Yes. It's a very big change. Yeah, I think some people have a better time of that, and some people have a worse time of that.
I know Dolores Cannon talked about a lot of people. They come here and they're depressed. They forget their purpose and they have kind of a miserable life. Some people want to kill themselves. Like half of them, it just doesn't work out in this lifetime. And other people do discover that they have some purpose, but for a lot of people, it's a big loss. You're saying,
Yeah, I think so. So we're living in a very interesting situation here on Earth, with many different types of people and different orientations, different feelings about being here in life.
I appreciate those beings that made the sacrifice and took the chance and came here to help. We really need them. I appreciate their sacrifice.
I do too. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so interesting to me that these people like the walk-ins, the star seeds, the hybrids, that they get so much nourishment and encouragement and love from their extraterrestrial beings, more than they do from human beings, even if they grow up in a loving family.
Yeah, because that's their real family. They understand them, the ETs.
And they feel that. They feel that their ET family is their real family, their true family. So they tend to welcome the visits. They don't think of them as abductions, even though they're taken to the spaceship now and then, or sometimes just visited here at home. But that really means a lot to them. It really sustains them.
Yeah. That's a whole different category compared to the abductees who are freak out and they're scared.
Yes, oh, completely different.
Yeah, yeah. So I should mention also below this video, there's links to your books on Amazon, your website, and get your books there, and also your YouTube channel.
Right. Yeah. If you want a signed copy of one of my 5 books, you can find them on my website, which is barbaralamregression.com. And you scroll through, there's a lot on that website, but eventually you get to where there are the books. And you can buy them, just pay through PayPal, and PayPal notices me, give me a notice, and I fulfill them with a little message and little signature. Some people like that. Or you can do Amazon too. That's perfectly fine. You can also on the website make give a request for a regression, and that will be transferred automatically to my email. And then when I see it and have time, I answer that. And then we can set up an appointment and you can have a regression.
Very good. We get your wrap up. Anything else you want to add?
Well, just encourage everybody to open their minds and open their hearts as well. Yeah, to realize that we're not alone. There is so much life going on in the universe. A lot of it we figure is very, very good. Some of it we may not like so much and distrust. But we're going to see, but at least let's get used to the idea that there really, really are all these other beings in existence, and that probably over time, we humans will be having more and more to do with them. So let's please just assume that we do not have to shoot them down. You know, if we see their crafts in our sky, which we do more and more, and just stay steady, open our minds, learn about it as much as we can, and I think it will actually take us in a good direction.
Yeah, it's part of our reality. But I want to get Happy Cat before you go. He wants to say goodbye.
Okay.
Happy Cat wants 1,000,000 hits in 5 years. So Happy Cat, say goodbye to Barbara, Happy Cat.
Oh, so beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet that feels really good to both of you.
Yeah, it keeps me company. Yeah, it's been great having you back, Barbara, for a third time. It's such an honor to have you. And thank you so much for your knowledge and wisdom. I can't thank you enough. This has been an excellent talk.
Thank you. Well, you're certainly welcome.
Okay. We'll be in touch soon.
Okay. Woo-hoo.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.